Shalom, my friends, from here in the Holy Land. I'm Yael Eckstein, President and Global CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, and I want to welcome you to a new season of the Nourish Your Biblical Roots podcast called Heroes of the Holocaust. The Holocaust, the darkest chapter in Jewish history, when God's people faced destruction at the hands of the Nazis. During this very dark time, there were individuals who chose courage instead of silence and compassion instead of fear. They were ordinary men and women, school teachers and soldiers, peasants and pastors who risked everything to save Jewish lives. In these 8 podcast episodes, you will hear their stories that will inspire you, stories of faith and action, of light breaking through unimaginable darkness. And as you listen, I pray that you will be reminded that standing with the Jewish people is not only a calling of the past, but a responsibility of the present, especially during these dark times. Thank you so much for listening and for continuing to stand with the Jewish people in a time when it matters most.
Hello, I'm CJ Burroughs with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Welcome back to Nourish Your Biblical Roots, Heroes of the Holocaust. Today's episode is called Underground. Underground. That word carries more than one meaning. During the Holocaust, resistance often had to happen in secret. Secret networks, secret messengers, people risking everything to fight back and to tell the truth, secretly. But underground can mean something else too. It can mean hidden beneath the surface, out of sight, where survival depends on silence and courage and the mercy of someone willing to help. We begin with a man who fought the Nazis not with a rifle, but with information. His name was Jan Karski, and this is his story. Some resistance movements fought with guns. Others fought with sabotage. And some fought with something far more fragile, information. Jan Karski was one of those fighters. He was born Jan Kozalewski in 1914 in Poland, into a Christian family in a neighborhood that was largely Jewish. From an early age, Jan lived among many cultures, many faiths, and many languages. Difference wasn't threatening to him, it was normal. Jan was brilliant, and he was disciplined. He graduated first in his class from military school. He trained as a diplomat. He interned in Romania, Germany, Switzerland, and Great Britain, a young man preparing for a life shaped by negotiation and words. A young man preparing for a life shaped by negotiation and words. Then, in September of 1939, that world collapsed. Germany invaded Poland from the west. The Soviet Union invaded from the east. The Polish state was crushed between 2 totalitarian powers. Jan's first war experience came with the Krakow Cavalry Brigade. He was captured not by the Germans, but by the Soviet Red Army. And there, in captivity, Jan made a decision that would save his life. When prisoners were transferred to German custody, Jan went with them, unknowingly escaping what history would know as the Katyn Forest Massacre, where more than 20,000 Polish officers were executed by the Soviets. In September of 1939, Jan escaped from a German prisoner transport and made his way back to Warsaw. The city he returned to was unrecognizable. Poland was occupied, fear ruled the streets, and resistance had already begun to take shape beneath the surface. Jan joined the Polish underground and took a new name, Jan Karski. It would become his legal name. It would also become the name that history remembers. Karski became a courier, a messenger moving between occupied Poland and the Polish government in exile. First in Paris, later in London, his job was simple but potentially lethal. Walk, observe, remember, and deliver the truth. He carried reports hidden in microfilm, memorized documents, remembered messages that couldn't be written down. He crossed borders illegally. He traveled through enemy territory. He lived under false identities. And in 1940, the Gestapo arrested him. They brutally tortured him. He attempted suicide rather than betray the resistance. But even that did not stop him. He escaped from a hospital with the help of underground operatives and returned to his work, more determined than ever before. But what would mark Jan Karski forever was not what he suffered. It was what he saw. Twice, Jewish resistance leaders smuggled Karski into the Warsaw Ghetto. Disguised, escorted, silent, he walked through streets of starvation and death. He later wrote, "My job was just to walk and observe and remember." Jan saw people collapsing where they stood. He saw children dying slowly. He saw a man with blank eyes. Karski asked what the man was doing. His guide whispered, "He's just dying." Later, Karski was taken to a transit camp, what he believed to be Bielski, where Jews were being prepared for extermination. What he witnessed there confirmed what many in the West still refuse to believe. This was not just persecution. This was annihilation. Karski made it his mission to speak. He traveled to London, then to America. He met with politicians, journalists, clergy. He briefed Allied leaders. He even met with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Again and again, he told them what he had seen. He brought awareness, and he begged for action. Many listened politely, but few acted. The truth was too large, too horrifying, and too inconvenient. Karski did not save individual Jewish lives with forged papers or hidden rooms, but he did something else, something just as dangerous. He became a witness. After the war, Karski settled in the U.S. He became a professor at Georgetown University, teaching there for 40 years. He rarely spoke publicly about what he had seen, until he did. In 1981, at the invitation of Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, Jan Karski spoke to those who had liberated concentration camps. He told them, "And thus I myself became a Jew. This sin will haunt humanity to the end of time, and I want it to be so." A year later, Israel recognized Jan Karski as righteous among the nations. This righteous Gentile story teaches us something profound, that truth does not always save lives immediately, that speaking does not guarantee listening, but that silence guarantees complicity. Jan Karski carried the truth during one of the darkest moments in history, and because he did, history cannot say it did not know. Jan Karski reminds us that resistance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a message carried in secret, a truth delivered at great cost, a witness refusing to let the world say it didn't know. But underground resistance was also carried out by people who fled into the wilderness, who built a hidden world of survival. Our next story is different from many others this season. These heroes of the Holocaust weren't Gentiles, they were Jewish. The Bielski brothers didn't just escape. They fought back, they rescued, and they turned a forest into a refuge. This is their story. Some fought from bunkers, some fought in streets, and some fought in the forests. Not with armies, not with orders, but with a simple idea: to save lives. While most of the heroes we've met have been righteous Gentiles, this story is about the Bielski brothers, Jewish partisans who turned the forest into a haven, and in doing so became unlikely architects of one of the greatest underground resistance efforts of the whole Holocaust. They came from a small village in what was then eastern Poland, and what's now western Belarus. It was a quiet community of farmers, millers, and neighbors who had lived there for generations. Among them was the Bielski family, David and Bela, parents to 12 children, 10 boys and 2 girls. When the Nazis swept through the region in 1941, that world changed in an instant. Ghettos were established. Mass killings followed. In December, German forces rounded up Jews from the nearby ghetto. Among those taken were the Bielski parents and at least 2 of their brothers. They were all murdered. 3 brothers survived, Tuvia, Asel, and Zeus, and a 4th, much younger brother, Aaron, joined them soon after. Instead of surrendering to despair, they made a decision that was both simple and extraordinary. They would not just fight back, they would save as many Jews as they could. So they fled into the woods. To local boys, the forest was familiar. It became their refuge, and eventually a mobile Jewish community in the wilderness, a resistance not just to the enemy, but to the annihilation of God's people. The Bielski partisans did not limit their ranks to fighters. They didn't take in just the strong young men who were able to fight. They welcomed everyone, women, children, the elderly, the sick, the vulnerable, anyone who could escape the Nazis and reach the forest. And the forest became a hidden society. There were mills and bakeries. There were workshops and infirmaries, schools, a synagogue. People found ways to prepare bread, mend clothing, care for the injured, and raise families. Tuvia Bielski, the oldest brother, was chosen as commander. He carried himself less like a warrior than a shepherd. His brother Asel became his deputy. Zeus took charge of reconnaissance, and young Aaron, he became a scout and a guide. Their ethos was clear from the beginning, and it set them apart from many other resistance units. Saving Jews was their chief mission. Tuvia is reported to have said what became their guiding principle: "It's more important to save Jews than to kill Germans." And that belief defined them. But the forest did not remain untouched. In February of 1943, Nazi forces launched a major operation against all of the partisans in the forest. German troops swept through the area, hunting resistance fighters and Jewish refugees alike. The Bielskis were forced to abandon everything they had built. Shelters were destroyed, supplies were lost. The community scattered into smaller groups, slipping away deeper, deeper into the forest. It was a moment that could have ended the story. Instead, it became a turning point. When danger passed, the Bielski brothers regrouped, and they began again. Deeper in the forest they rebuilt. Shelters were dug anew, workshops reassembled, the community reformed, stronger and more organized than ever before. And more Jews kept coming. Their numbers eventually swelled to more than 1,200 people, making it one of the largest and most successful rescue efforts during the Holocaust. Yes, they engaged in armed actions when necessary, ambushing collaborators, defending their community, sometimes coordinating with other partisan units. But their priority was saving lives, not taking them. In this sanctuary in the wilderness, fear and death did not have the last word. This community was a living, breathing resistance to the genocide that had consumed so much of Europe. In 1944, as the Red Army pushed the Nazis out of Belarus, the Bielski group emerged, not as fugitives, but as survivors. More than 1,000 strong, most of whom would have been murdered without the brothers' vision. Their resistance was underground in the most literal sense, hidden beneath the forest canopy, far from cities, far from command posts. And their resistance was fought not just with weapons, it was fought with compassion, community, and the unyielding faith that every life had value. After the war, the surviving brothers went their separate ways. Tuvia and Zeus eventually settled in the U.S. Asel, conscripted into the Soviet army, did not survive the war. The youngest, Aaron, he lived well into old age, a witness to the lives that the Bielski brothers had saved, and to a people who refused to disappear. During the Holocaust, the underground resisted, with weapons, with determination, with courage, and with community. But underground doesn't just mean hidden resistance. Sometimes it's more literal. While some heroes fought in forests, some fought beneath the earth itself. Our final story today takes us to Latvia. There, an ordinary worker turned a cellar into a sanctuary. A hidden space meant for storage became a lifeline, and Jewish families survived because one man kept a promise and kept a light burning in the darkness. This is his story. In the Latvian port city of Latvia, where the Baltic breeze carried the smell of salt, there lived a man named Robert Seduls. Before the war, Robert had been many things: a seaman, a boxer, a working man. But when the Nazis overtook Latvia, Robert was working as a janitor in an apartment building, a quiet job, a job that let him see who came and who went, a job that placed him in the lives of others. One of those people was David Zivkon, a Jewish resident of the building. They weren't strangers, they were neighbors. They spoke, they trusted one another. And when the Nazis began their murderous plans for Latvia's Jews, Robert made David a promise. He would help. Just as they had been across Europe, the Jews of Latvia were forced into a ghetto, a place of fences and fear. And David Zivkon realized it also meant death. In October of 1943, David escaped with his wife and another Jewish couple. They went to the only person David believed might be able to save them. And Robert Seduls opened his door. He led them down into a concealed space in the cellar of the apartment building, a place meant for storage. But now it became something else, a refuge. Those four would remain hidden there for a year and a half, and they would not be alone. Over the following months, more Jewish refugees arrived. First 3 men, then 3 more. By April of 1944, the cellar held 11 people. That same month, David's sister Rivka arrived with her 3-year-old daughter Ada. Robert realized that the cellar was no place for a small child. He arranged for Ada to stay with a nearby widow, safe, hidden, and alive. Ada's mother remained below ground, trusting Robert to keep her daughter from harm. Feeding 11 extra mouths during wartime was nearly impossible. Food was rationed, bread was precious, hunger was constant. Some of the men hiding in the cellar were skilled workmen. They helped Robert with repair jobs, bringing in small amounts of money, enough to keep the food coming, enough to keep hope alive. Above ground, the Nazis and their Latvian collaborators searched relentlessly for hidden Jews. Raids were common. Because of this, Robert installed a special warning light in the cellar. If patrols approached, the light would flash. And one time, it did. The Jews below stood armed with pistols, prepared for a firefight they did not expect to survive. For an hour they waited, breaths held, bodies rigid, listening for boots. Then, the patrol passed. The cellar remained undiscovered. That warning light was not the only light Robert brought to the Jews hiding underground. He brought books, newspapers, pieces of the world outside. And he never forgot Ada. Robert visited the little girl regularly. He took photographs of her and brought them back to her mother there in the cellar, proof that her child was growing, smiling, alive. With a cellar meant for storage, Robert Seduls saved lives during the war. Robert would not live to see liberation. In March of 1945, Robert Seduls was killed by shell fire. But in the cellar, his wife Johanna Seduls carried on. She continued her husband's holy work. She continued to care for the 11 Jews in hiding until the war ended. Of the 7,000 Jews who lived in the city before the war, only 30 survived. And 11 of those survived because of that cellar. In 1981, Robert and Johanna Seduls were named Righteous among the Nations. They were not soldiers, they were not politicians. They were ordinary people who refused to be ordinary when it mattered most. Sometimes the bravest acts take place underground, and sometimes one light is enough to fight the darkness in the world above it. Jan Karski carried the truth through enemy territory, so the world would know that truth. The Bielski brothers carried their people into the forest, so that God's people could survive, even as the Nazis tried to erase them. And Robert Seduls carried food, hope, and love into a cellar, so the hunted could stay hidden and stay alive. Each of their stories reminds us that in the worst of times, God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary good. As we continue this season of Heroes of the Holocaust, I pray these stories move us. To remember the past, to stand against anti-Semitism today, and to live out a faith that refuses to look away, especially when God's children are in danger. To learn how the fellowship is fighting anti-Semitism and helping God's people, visit ifcj.org.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Heroes of the Holocaust. I'm Yael Eckstein, President and Global CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. The stories that you've heard today remind us all that even in the darkest moments, there are those who choose righteousness boldly, faithfully. And when they see the suffering, they respond with courage, faith, and love, which is a message that I think all of us need to hear right now. As people of faith, these heroes still speak to us today, maybe louder than ever before. Their legacy lives on in every act of compassion, in every stand taken on behalf of God's people, and in every heart that shares His love with those in need. So thank you. Thank you for being part of this legacy. Your prayers, your friendship, and your support continue to bring help, hope, and protection to the Jewish people, just as these righteous Gentiles once did. You're part of a link in the chain. May their memory be a blessing, and may we each be inspired to be a light in the darkness when the world needs us to shine more than ever before.